nonverbal communication, what comes to your mind first?
Time.
Gestures?
Facial expressions.
And it also can citate. I think there's more.
Now, let's talk about nonverbal communication.
By the way, I'm Chorlyn Delas Penas,
And I am Judy and Pang.
and we're going to talk about the nonverbal communication.
The first to tackle is the functions of nonverbal communication. Nonverbal communication is not only omnipresent, but is also an essential ingredient in human interaction. It also occurs in a specific reason. Examining those reasons will illustrate why any of the study of intercultural interaction must include information about nonverbal communication. There are 5 functions of nonverbal communication. First is creating identity. Second, expressing internal states. Third, regulating interaction. Fourth, substituting for words. And fifth, repeating the message.
From personal experience, you know how judgments are often made by another person based on such things as skin color, use of makeup, facial expression, manner of dress, accent, jewelry, and even the type of handshake offered. In nearly every culture and in many co-cultures, tattoos express an indelible identity. Nonverbal communication is the predominant means of conveying meaning from person to person. Consciously and unconsciously, intentionally and unintentionally, people make important judgments concerning your internal state with the nonverbal messages you generate. Be it fear, joy, anger, or sadness, your posture, face, and eyes can convey your feelings without you ever uttering a word.
Gonna swing from the chandelier. I'm gonna fly. Excuse me, where's the CR? Over there. Okay.
Next would be defining nonverbal communication.
Nonverbal communication involves all those nonverbal stimuli in a communication setting that are generated by both the source and his or her use of environment, and that have potential message value for the source and or receiver.
The following will be the definition that would not only establish the boundaries of the nonverbal communication but would also reflect how the process actually functions. Part of the functioning involves intentional and unintentional messages and the reciprocal relationship between verbal and nonverbal messages. The definition permits to include intentional and unintentional behavior. One feature that separates humans from other animals is that humans can actually plan before they do the act.
The intentional act is when you offer a broad smile to your friend as part of your greeting. Yet, nonverbal messages are often produced without a conscious awareness that they may have meaning for other people. For example, frowning because the sun is in your eyes may make someone mistakenly believe you are angry.
Next is the verbal and nonverbal messages. Knapp and Cole wrote that we need to understand that separating verbal and nonverbal messages into 2 separate categories is virtually impossible.
For example, you often use nonverbal messages to repeat a point you're trying to make verbally.
In studying nonverbal communications, there are some potential problems and misconceptions that are associated. First is that nonverbal communication can be ambiguous, meaning it could be understood in more than one way or have more than one possible meaning. Therefore, a nonverbal cue seen as positive in another culture may be seen as obscene in another culture. Next is that multiple factors influence nonverbal communication. Thirdly, the study of nonverbal communication includes cultural universals.
Ekman and others present the theory that there is a basic set of at least 6 facial expressions that are innate, universal, and carry the same basic meaning throughout the world. The 6 pan-cultural and universal emotions conveyed by facial expressions are happiness, sadness, fear, anger, disgust, and surprise.
Rosenblatt noted, what emotions are felt, how they are expressed, and how they are understood are matters of culture.
Nonverbal communication plays a crucial and necessary part in communicative interactions between people from different cultures. For example, the Hindus greet each other by placing their palms together in front of themselves while tilting their heads slightly downward. This salutation reflects their belief that a deity exists in everyone.
The messages of the body. Most classifications divide nonverbal communications into 2 comprehensive categories. First are those that are primarily produced by the body, and second are those that the individual combines with the setting.
From hairsprays to hair pieces, from false eyelashes to blue contact lenses, from cosmetic surgery to tanning salons, people show their concern for how they appear to others.
Initial attraction from one person to another is frequently the precursor to actual interaction, whereas a lack of attraction may preclude people from taking any steps toward relational development. The judgment of beauty across cultures is a perception of ethnocentrism, meaning what is seen as beautiful in one culture may look hideous into people to another culture.
In the United States, people tend to value the appearance of men with muscular bodies and women who are tall and slender. This view of attractiveness is not the rule in all cultures. For example, in large parts of Africa, plumpness is considered a sign of beauty, health, and wealth, and slimness is evidence of unhappiness, disease, or mistreatment at the hands of one's husband. Skin color is the one that has the greatest impact on perception and interaction. Knapp and Hall noted that in many respects, permanent skin colors have been the most potent body stimulus for determining interpersonal responses in our culture. The United States is not the only location where members of a culture are judged by their skin tone and seek various means to alter that tone. South Asian and Chinese women often avoid sunlight so that their skin remains light. Clothing can be used to convey economic status, education, social status, moral standards, and others. Muslim women wear scarves, veils, and the burqa as nonverbal symbols of womanhood, identity, and more importantly, as a manifestation of their religious beliefs. Young girls and women are also urged in the Quran to dress in garments that do not resemble the clothes of non-believers.
Attire is used often to establish one's cultural identity. Body movements. Kinesics is a study on how movement communicates. Kinetic cues are those visible movements that can send intentional and unintentional messages. Next is posture. On an intercultural level, posture can offer insights into a culture's values.
The Japanese bow mirrors their value of status and respect. Actually, the Japanese have a wide range of uses for the bow. It can be a nonverbal way of expressing thank you, a greeting, an apology, a congratulatory gesture, and much more. Thai people use a bow that is similar to the one employed by the Japanese. This movement, called the Y, is made by pressing both palms together in front of one's body, with the fingertips reaching to about neck level. The basic value behind the bow is to demonstrate respect. It is also used to say thank you.
Gestures. Inability to read the meaning of gestures in an intercultural setting could result into confusion and awkwardness. The following are the uncertainties of intercultural gestures.
In the United States, this gesture is emblematic of the word okay. In Japan and Korea, it traditionally signifies money. Among Arabs, this gesture is usually accompanied by a baring of teeth, signifying extreme hostility. To a Tunisian, the gesture means "I'll kill you." In the United States, pointing at someone usually does not carry negative connotations. In fact, directions are often given by pointing in one direction or another with the index finger. Germans point with the little finger, while in Japan, pointing is done with the entire hand with the palm held upward. In much of Asia, pointing the index finger at a person is considered rude. There are limitless, idiosyncratic gestures in each culture. These are the distinctive gestures whose meanings are feature and property of a particular culture. For example, the French kisses her fingertips. The Italian twists an imaginary moustache. The Japanese have a gesture whose actual movement is not unique to that culture, yet the meaning is exclusive to that culture. The gesture is made by pointing both index fingers above the head at the top of the ears as if they were the horns of an ogre. The sign used for beckoning is also attached to culture. In the United States, when a person wants to signal a friend to come, he or she usually makes the gesture with one hand, palm up, fingers more or less together, and moving toward the body. Movements and gestures denoting agreement represent another example of culturally based gestures. In the United States, moving your head up and down is perceived as a sign of agreement. This same movement can have different meanings in different cultures. Among Native American, Middle Eastern, and Pacific Island groups, it often means "I hear you speaking." It does not signal that the listener understands the message, nor does it suggest that he or she agrees. There are also cultural differences that regulate the frequency and intensity of gestures. For example, Brazilians say that if you tie their hands, they cannot speak. They use hand gestures and broad arm gestures as they talk. You can witness differences in gestures by looking at various co-cultures.
Facial expressions. Cultural expectations and norms often dictate when, where, how, and to whom facial expressions are displayed. Different cultures construct their own rules for what are the appropriate facial expressions as well as the aspects of behavior should be attended to. Different cultures construct their own rules for what are the appropriate facial expressions as well as what aspects of behavior should be attended to.
The evil eye means being able to send another person a thought that can cause a damage in a host of ways.
First, I express emotions, monitor feedback, indicate degrees of attentiveness and interest, regulate the flow of the conversation, influence charges and attitude, define power and status relationships, and help modify impression of management. Second, eyes are significant to the communication process because of the number of messages they can send. For Americans, a direct gaze signals a positive connection from one person to another and communicates caring and common courtesy. If we turn away when speaking to others, we communicate that the words we are saying are difficult or we are thinking about other things.
Touch, often considered the most fundamental of all your senses, is a primitive and indispensable form of communication.
In the dominant U.S. culture, there are 6 basic types of touching. First, accidental touching. Second, professional touching. Third, social politeness touching. Fourth, friendship touches. Fifth, love intimacy touches. And sixth, sexual touch.
Paralanguage. Paralanguage is divided into 3 categories. First, we have vocal qualities. Second, vocal characteristics. And third, vocal segregates.
Spam, I don't like your article. I want you to change this and this, okay? I want you to pass this on Monday, 5 p.m. No more extensions, okay? Yes.
Vocal segregates are sounds that are audible but are not actual words. These sounds are used as substitutes for words.
In many cultures, certain sounds also take on special meanings.
The variation in distance between you and the people with whom you interact is as much a part of the communication experience as the words being exchanged. The study of this message system, called proxemics, is concerned with such thing.
Your personal space is that area you occupy and call your own.
Hall classified how personal space was used in the United States. First, intimate distance. Actual contact to 18 inches is normally reserved for very personal relationships. Second, in personal distance, 18 inches to 4 feet. There is a little chance of physical contact and you can speak in a normal voice. Third, social distance, 4 to 12 feet, is the distance at which most members of the dominant culture conduct business and take part in social gatherings. And fourth, public distance is usually used in public presentations and can vary from relatively close to very far. Seating. Like so many features of nonverbal communication, seating arrangements send both inconspicuous and obvious message.
The way people arrange furniture also communicates.
In Japan, offices are usually often shared with many colleagues, and the furnishings are like workers, placed in close proximity. If you arrive 30 minutes late for an important appointment and offer an apology, you send a certain message about yourself. Telling someone how guilty you feel about your belated arrival also sends a message.
Rules that apply to punctuality are taught implicitly and explicitly.
As Nishiyama points out, the time usage in Japan is usually determined by the status relationships between the people involved. In other words, someone in Japan would wait much longer for a person of higher status to arrive than if the person of lower status. For Japanese, a person's use of time is yet another way of showing respect. In the United States, to outsiders, Americans always appear to be in a hurry.
As the word monochronic implies, this concept views time as linear, sequential, and segmented.
Cultures that can be classified as monochronic time include Germany, Austria, Sweden, Norway, England, Finland, Canada, Switzerland, and dominant U.S. culture. A polychronic view of time sees the maintenance of harmonious relationships as the agenda, so that use of time needs to be flexible in order that we do right by the various people to whom we have obligations. Silence also provides feedback informing both sender and receiver about the clarity of an idea or its significance in the overall interpersonal exchange. Americans are not the only group of people who prefer noise and talking over silence. In the commercial world, a silent reaction to a business proposal would seem negative to American, German, French, Southern European, and Arab executives. This was a way of saying that communication is a behavior that you engage in and that others respond to. As simplistic as it sounds, what you bring to the communication event greatly influences the success or failure of that event. Although know thyself is an overused expression, it is, nevertheless, worth repeating. Is my behavior making people feel comfortable or uncomfortable? Am I adjusting my nonverbal messages to the feedback I am receiving from my communication partner? How are people reacting to my use of space, touch, paralanguage, time, and the like? If my messages are being misinterpreted, is it because my unintentional messages rather than my intentional messages are impacting my communication partner? Using feedback is directly related to the preceding suggestion regarding the notion of self-monitoring. Both suggestions ask you to be aware of the interactive nature of communication. That is to say, the recipients of your messages are not passive observers. They receive your verbal and nonverbal symbols and respond in a variety of ways. Because feedback is critical, you need to create an atmosphere that encourages it. Communication skills that promote feedback include smiling, head nodding, leaning forward, and even laughing. Although the four actions just mentioned are found in Western cultures, they often produce positive reactions in other cultures as well. Each of these nonverbal activities contributes to a relaxed atmosphere that fosters an accurate reading of your receiver's nonverbal response to your messages. As you have already learned, communication is rule-governed. Some self-reflection tells you that your behavior is different as you move from place to place. Think of all the rules that are operation in schoolrooms, courtrooms, churches, business meetings, parties, restaurants, sporting events, funerals, and the like. Each of these settings requires behavior that you have learned as part of the acculturation process. When trying to improve nonverbal communication skills, you need to understand how each situation might influence meaning given a specific action. A certain degree of introspection about your own culture is an important step in improving nonverbal behavior.